Hi, I'm Michelle Seiler Tucker, Mergers and Acquisitions, Master Intermediary, Senior Business Analyst, and a bunch of other stuff. I've been in Mergers and Acquisitions for 20 years, sold over 1,000 businesses. Join me this week on the Jesse T Show.
Michelle, welcome to the Jesse T Show.
Thank you, Jesse. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, it's an honor, a pleasure. I'm super excited to have a great conversation with you. You and I, we share some of the same connections, and even a co-author of this book that's coming out, which I'm sure we'll get to, Sharon Lechter. How did you start running in these circles with the greats like Sharon Lechter, Mark Victor Hansen? You've named a few other folks. How did you start getting plugged into them?
Well, I think, I spoke at a couple of different conferences, CEO Space, Secret Knock, some other events that I met Sharon along the way, and just met her, and we kind of run in the same circle. We know the same friends. So a very good friend of ours actually really connected us and said, Sharon, you should really look at Michelle's manuscript for Exit Rich, and she would love to have you as her co-author. So he kind of, made that connection between us, even though we knew each other. I wouldn't say that we really knew each other. But I sent her the manuscript. She fell in love with it, and she's a co-author. So her and her husband, because her husband is an IP attorney, an intellectual property attorney. So they write, or really her, but they write the Mentor's Corner after every chapter in Exit Rich, which is great. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know this about Sharon. She's a CPA, a financial literacy expert. She's been an advisor to several different presidents. Plus, she wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. So she's a New York Times bestselling author 5 times in a row. I'll probably talk about her more than I talk about myself.
It's good to have great friends that help you go through life together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And she loved the manuscript, which I was quite flattered, that she liked it so much. She really had no changes. And she said it's a great manuscript. So, it's great because there are so many businesses that are exiting poor. So this is really a must read for all entrepreneurs, rather, even if you're just thinking about starting your business, everyone should read Exit Rich, because it's not just about selling a business. It's actually about building a sustainable, scalable, and when you're ready, a sellable asset, because so many businesses won't sell.
There's so much there that I want to dive into. But the first thing is serendipity. And so I was in Scottsdale, Arizona last week, just a few days ago, and she came to this mastermind speakeasy that's put on by Steve Sims. Have you heard of the name Steve Sims before?
Of course. Her and I were on his show together.
Yeah. So we run in the same circles because Steve and I have become really good friends. Mark Victor Hansen and his wife have been on the podcast. Now you're here and she's coming on. And so she came to this speakeasy in Scottsdale, Arizona last week, and they were up doing this fireside chat. Mark Victor Hansen, Steve Sims, Sharon Lechter, sitting on these 3 chairs right next to each other. And Sharon actually picked up the book and showed it to everyone. And the book was Exit Rich. So she was talking about being an author, co-author on that book. She talked about everything you mentioned, from working with Robert Kiyosaki and doing the, co-authoring on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's really beautiful to hear that these people are aligned. And it seems like really great people run in the same circles. And that's what I'm starting to feel. And to your point, I think it's really important to understand, because you do promote Sharon very heavily, and rightfully so. But she comes from this mindset of, if you're going to build a business, be able to build it to sell it, and sell it well. And then also she comes from a fiduciary standpoint, which is what I am by trade. I do this podcast for fun, and obviously it monetizes, but I'm a fiduciary. And so I help people reach wealth, and I do it without any preconceived issues of having to receive a commission or do any of that stuff. And so we align really heavily there. And she actually has an interesting story that parallels mine. But I just think it's really fun how once you start connecting with great people, you start running in the same circles. And so how did you first get connected with her? What was the very first touch point for you and Sharon?
I think I met her the very first time at CEO Space. She was speaking. She was a keynote speaker. I attended as a guest the first time. And then after that, I was on faculty. So I became a speaker there, teaching my own classes. And that was the very first time I met her. And then I ran into her a few times after that at different events like Secret Knock. There's another event that Eric Swanson puts on that I ran into her at. So just, running into her at different events, kind of getting to know each other.
Very cool. And if you could, for the audience, maybe the 1 or 2 people that haven't heard a bit of the story yet, give us a little context on your journey. How did you start to get to where you are today?
So, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always, liked small business. I was not your typical child. I didn't want, I never played with toys, never played with dolls. And my mom's like, what's wrong with this child? Like I never would play with anything. I would walk around with a notebook and a pen and I would ask everybody a million questions, and I would always ask them at the age of 7, 8 years old, what do you do? How did you start doing it? And I always asked entrepreneurial questions. And I'm not sure really where that came from because I really didn't grow up with a family of entrepreneurs other than my dad did own his own business. But my mom didn't, my siblings didn't. So I just have always been an entrepreneur and I've owned many different businesses and many different verticals. And I did get kind of sucked into corporate America. I went to work at Xerox and I was there for 6 months. My nickname was the closer because every time somebody couldn't close a deal, they're like, well, bring Michelle. She's the closer. She'll close anything. And then within 6 months, I got promoted at Xerox into regional vice president. And I learned very quickly that I did not like corporate America. I learned
Yeah.
very quickly that that is not, the road that I want to stay on. And so anyway, so I transitioned into franchise development, franchise sales, franchise consulting, and became a partner with a franchisor. And after that, really transitioned into mergers and acquisitions, started selling small businesses at first, restaurants, flower shops, gyms, things of that nature. And then within a year or two, started selling large businesses, $10 million and up. And then I transitioned into fixing businesses because, as Steve Forbes says, 8 out of 10 businesses are not sellable. 80% will not sell. So that's when I transitioned into fixing businesses, growing businesses, and then putting them on a build to sell model. And so I partner with business owners, investing my money, my time, energy, effort, and always have an exit plan within 3 to 5 years, typically for in the millions, and I've bought businesses and flipped them as well. And then we still sell businesses. So at any given time, I own 5 to 10 businesses that I'm building to sell.
Part of your investment portfolio, but also part of your
Yes.
life's work. It sounds like being able to help people.
Yeah, it is. It's truly my passion. I've always been a people person and I've just always in small business. I mean, it breaks my heart when I see business owners that are forced into selling for pennies on the dollar, close their business, or even worse, have to file bankruptcy. Most people don't know this, but when I wrote Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth in 2013, I did the research and realized that, 85 to 95% of all startups would go out of business. We all know that, right? That's common knowledge. However, when Sharon and I wrote Exit Rich in 2019 and 2020, I did the same research and learned that the business landscape has flip-flopped. So it's only 30% of startups will go out of business now. Only 30%. That
Wow.
out of 27.6 million companies, those businesses have been in business for 10 years or more. 70% of those businesses are at risk of going out of business.
It's
And
incredible.
you hear about the, public businesses all the time, like Toys R Us in business 75 years goes out of business. Kmart, Steinmart, Pier 1. And Godiva, our favorite chocolate store, is closing down 1,500 locations. GNC is closing down 900 locations. But you're not hearing about the private businesses on every street corner in every town in every state that are going out of business. And it just breaks my heart. So it really is my mission, my passion to help save one business at a time.
What are you seeing out of the majority of, regardless of how long they've been in business, type of businesses? What are the one or two things? Because I have a few ideas coming from my background as a wealth planner, but what are a few things that you see every single time a business is in trouble? The one or two things that they're having issues with.
Well, one of the big ones is they stopped doing what I call AIM. AIM is always innovate and market. They stop innovating. These business owners have become complacent and they keep doing things the way they've always done them. And business is forever changing. And Amazon has really changed the way that consumers purchase products.
For sure.
So you're either growing or dying.
Yep.
And these business owners are dying because they stopped innovating. So innovation is key. You always must continue to innovate. I mean, it's like Blockbuster. Blockbuster saw Netflix. They saw the writing on the wall. They had the opportunity to purchase Netflix and they did nothing and they're out of business. So same thing with Toys R Us. They didn't do anything different in 75 years. You have to innovate. You have to do things differently.
Innovate and not being too romantic to be open to change. There's a lot of companies that are they die on their sword or shield, so to speak. If this is who we are, this is how we were built, and we're not going to change. And like that's the whole thing. It's innovation. If you're not open to change, you'll die.
And you have to listen to the market.
Yes.
It's like the syrup, right? It's like the syrup. What's the name of the syrup? I forget the name of the syrup. Is it Aunt Jemima syrup?
I actually don't eat a lot of like food like that, so I guess it's Aunt Jemima.
Aunt Jemima. They had to change their name. They had to change their logo. They had to change their imaging, their branding. They had to change all of that because they were losing market share.
Yes.
They could have just fell on their sword and said, "Oh, we're not doing anything because we're Aunt Jemima." But they ended up changing everything because they knew they had to, in which to stay relevant and keep market share.
Adapt or die.
So things change. Events happen. Yeah, adapt or die. You got to pivot.
No, there's a lot of pivoting going on in 2020 for Corona and pandemic, and there's all sorts of thoughts, and I have my own personal beliefs there. And I've seen a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs actually do well last year that were prepared, and there's a lot of wealth created, and let's call it a typical recession if you're prepared. So there's the flip side. There's people that are companies are doing well, but I want to touch on a point, kind of drawing back to when you said innately you had these two gifts, and it's strange because this is where I operated. I'm a poor kid from Boston, and I've had a crazy life, and I shouldn't even be alive. And I'm thankful for that. Very thankful that I am, because I've been able to do a lot of amazing things for myself and others. And so when I was younger, I had that entrepreneurial hustle. I would buy and sell and trade comic books, baseball cards. I would run over to Logan Airport and return the smart carts and get a quarter every time it popped out of the stall. And so I always had these little things that I would do to try to make money, because it came from a place of scarcity. But it was innate. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family like yourself. And it just kind of was something that I did. Also, I was very much and still very much a student at heart. And I love to learn. I have a thirst for knowledge, and I do all sorts of interesting things to try to gain insights, and, from plant medicines to podcasts and all these different things that just level up. Where did you learn that those might have been instilled in you? Did you have somebody, when it came to your learning and student mentality, that fostered that thirst for knowledge? And then the second piece is, where did the sales acumen come from in such a short amount of time? Because I'm a sales guy too. And for you to be the closer after 6 months, that's pretty special. Where did those talents come from?
So the first question, no, not really. I wish I could tell you some great story about some inspirational hero that was in my life. And no, not really. I came from a pretty troubled childhood as well. But not really. I really didn't have any role models or any, one that really took me, under their wings, until much later, until I would say 2011, 2012 is when I started, going to some of these different events and working with some different mentors and coaches. I would tell you my biggest hero, my biggest mentor, or my biggest role model is my husband now, and we've been together for about 25 years. But as a youngster, not really, and if everybody says, Michelle, is there anything you would change in your life? And the only thing I would maybe do differently is try to align myself with mentors earlier on.
Yep.
As far as your second question, as far as sales goes, I've been in sales my whole life. So even as a little kid, I was selling everything, I was selling people to give me their story, And so I've always been in sales. When I went to Xerox, I had been in sales for, years before that. But yes, I was there for 6 months. I wasn't nicknamed a closer. It's pretty, incredible too, because my supervisor came to me and said, Michelle, I want you to apply for the regional vice president position. She goes, you'll never get it, because you're up against people who have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're applying too. And I'm like, well, why should I apply for something I'm never going to get? And she said, you won't get it because you've been here only 6 months. And she said, you should do it for the experience. You don't just do things to get things. You do things to learn. And she said, you should do it for the experience. And I said, okay. It was a 3-month process, like a really grueling process where you had to meet with all these top level executives. And I ended up getting it. I ended up hating it, but I ended up getting it.
It's funny, the thing that you strive for and want the most, especially in corporate, you realize the grass isn't greener on the other side.
Well, and not only that, but business owners really should never promote their top salesperson to management.
Right.
And you got a person nicknamed the closer that can close, practically anything and everything. You need to leave that person in sales. And that's what I like. I like sales. I like solving problems. I like coming up with solutions. I'm a people person. So, my clients are my friends. And so I didn't like the corporate broker. I didn't like, gosh, you can never make any decisions. You had to go through meetings after meetings after
It's awful.
meetings and can never get anything done. I was over 85 sales reps, but I couldn't even meet with my people because I was always in meetings.
Yeah, your talents were stripped away from you. What you were great at was put on the shelf. You couldn't
Yep.
you couldn't operate where you were amazing, and that happens a lot. They find this amazing sales person, it's been crushing it, and they take them out of the field, so to speak, make them less relevant. Number one, to their people because they're not in the field in the trenches with them, and then number two, they take away the revenue
Right.
this person was generating, and so now they want this man. And here's the thing: most great salespeople, I'd say a good portion of them, don't always make for the best leaders because they're so good at what they do. And this is speaking for myself. I'm calling myself out. My first sales gig was outside sales, door to door, working on commission. And I loved it. I don't know why, but I loved it. And I was really good at it. And I realized that when I first got out of the field, so to speak, and went into management, I was trying to teach people how to be me. And you can't do that. It's like when Michael Jordan went from player to, owner. He's a terrible owner because he wanted everyone to be as good as he was. And there's no one that's going to be Michael Jordan. Did you feel some of that same, angst as well?
That's why entrepreneurs struggle so much, is because it's very hard for them to hire people, train people, manage people, and keep people.
Yeah.
Because they want everybody to be like them. Me too. I'm always saying, well, this person should do this and this person should do that. My husband's like, not everybody is you, Michelle.
Right.
And if they are you, they're not going to work for you.
Right. It's a fine line.
So I see that all the time. I mean, I saw that at Xerox. I see that all the time in every business, in every business I'm a part of, every business I partner with. Most entrepreneurs make the worst managers. They really do, because they're visionaries, and we're so, we hold ourselves to a much higher level of standard that we want to hold everybody else accountable to the same standard that we hold ourselves to.
Yep. And there's part of that where you want people to have a certain standard, but then there's also the grace of letting people kind of grow into their power. Right. And that was something I had to do.
Well, yes. And that takes some skill for entrepreneurs, because most entrepreneurs are control freaks. And they kind of want to do everything themselves, or they want to dictate to everybody how to do it. So it does take some grace to really learn how to, allow people to grow, how to empower people to make the right decisions. If you don't do that, you're never really going to have a company. You're just going to have a glorified job.
Piss a lot of people off, right? And own a job. What was
Which is what most business owners actually own, is a job.
Yep. Yeah, that's something.
Which is why we wrote Exit Rich, about how to build your business on what we call the 6 Ps. So you have a business that can run without you, because if you have a job, buyers are not going to buy a job, they buy a business.
Yep. They want an investment where they can see a return.
Right.
As far as your move from Xerox, was that the last corporate job you had?
Yes. I like to say my last and only, but I always say never say never.
Right. What was the move after Xerox?
The move after Xerox was in a franchise sales, franchise development, franchise consulting. And I had partnered with a franchisor. And so I did that for several years. And then after that is when I transitioned into selling companies.
And what was that experience like for you? Was it just like you picked right up, hit the ground running? Was there a lot of learning curve for you?
On selling businesses?
Yes.
Yeah, it was very different, because I thought, I was actually partners with a franchisor, and I had sold hundreds and hundreds of franchises with this franchisor. And I learned, that our values were not aligned. At first I thought our values were aligned. We shared the same ethics. And then clearly we didn't, because they were growing so fast that they never built a solid infrastructure. And all they wanted to do was keep selling more. Well, I wanted to pull back. I wanted to pull the plug and say, no more sales, no more sales until you fix the problem and build your infrastructure. And they kept over promising and under delivering. And I'm just the opposite. So it just became a nightmare, because we couldn't see eye to eye. They're like, well, you need to be on our side, not the franchisees. I'm like, no. The franchisees are our clients.
Yep.
They are our side. There is no other side. And so we just couldn't see eye to eye. So I had them buy me out. And then I'm like, well, what am I going to do next? I could stay in franchise development because I had all these other franchisors that wanted to work with me. And I did stay with some of them. But then I transitioned. I said, I'm going to transition into selling companies, because I had so many buyers, come to me and say, look, I want to buy an existing business. I don't want a franchise. And I said, okay. And so I transitioned. I thought it was going to be easy. How much harder could it be to sell an existing franchise? I mean, existing business versus a new franchise. And I learned that it's a lot different and a lot harder because with a new franchise, what do you have? I mean, it's pretty much cookie cutter. Yes, you got to find the demographics. Yes, you got to find the location. Yes, you got to do the build out. You got to find the franchisee. You got to hire the employees. But within an existing business, you have to deal with the financials, all the moving parts, the current working capital, current inventory, the current AR, all the people, non-competes. I mean, there's so many more things that you have to deal with in an existing business versus selling a new franchise.
And
So I
so
made some mistakes along the way.
what were some of the key learnings in terms of how you operated moving forward from those mistakes?
One of the biggest ones was to learn not to listen to attorneys and CPAs.
Okay.
Sorry,
Can you
Sharon.
dive into that a little bit?
I know Sharon's a CPA, but yeah, one of the biggest things is do my own due diligence.
Okay.
Don't just listen to what they say and think that that's, that that's the word, that that's the gospel, that that's how it is, because it isn't. I went to my very first closing. It was a small flower shop and the landlord was out of town and actually out of the country. And I wanted to postpone the closing. And the buyer and seller didn't want to. So I asked the attorney, and the attorney said, no, it's fine. We can work with a transition lease agreement. We don't have to have the landlord give us a new lease. I'm like, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, of course I'm sure. Now, remember, I'm used to dealing with leases, but just new leases for new franchisees.
Right.
So we go to the closing and the buyer and seller are like, okay, where's the lease? And I go, well, there isn't one because they're out of the country. And they said, well, we thought you got the lease. And I said, no, the attorney said we don't need it. And the attorney said, I never said that.
Oh,
Attorney completely threw me under the bus in front of my clients. And he said, I never said that. We can't close without a lease. Now, why would you do that? What's the motivation of that? So, I learned early on, do my own due diligence, do my own research, trust but verify.
Yes.
If you're going to get an attorney's opinion, get several opinions.
Yep.
If you're going to get a CPA's opinion, get several CPA's opinions. And so I learned that very on that, take responsibility and do my own due diligence.
It's such an important life lesson. And it's one that you kind of have to learn through experience and through folly and kind of what people will call failure, but what I call learning lessons, right? The things that teach you that you just keep moving forward. And you mentioned mentors a little while ago, and I've innately always sought out, like yourself, asked questions. And that's a form of getting mentorship. Even if you're asking one question to one person in that situation, you're learning, you're growing. Right. And there's something that's been put in front of me. I'm a big believer that things find you, like the master will appear when the student's ready, so to speak. And a couple of years ago, I learned this rule that I operate by, one of my life kind of ethos rules, where it talks about the rule of thirds when connecting with people. Have you heard of this before?
I think so, but enlighten me.
Yep. So it'll tie back to the question about mentors and your mentors. So the rule of thirds is you have three buckets of people in your life when it comes to, let's say, just relationships. And so you have the rule of third that's above you. Those are your mentors. Those are the people that can guide you in business and life. They've had a lot of life experience, so they can kind of navigate you through some of those obstacles that you're going through. The next level, which is right where we are at the current space and time, is people that are doing things that we're pretty much doing the same things. And so we can go through battle together, we can learn together, we could trade notes, and we can kind of do life together. And then the ones that are coming up below us, those are the ones that we want to pass this information on to, so that they can grow and they can be mentored. And then eventually it kind of completes that circle of information. And so who's in your thirds? I know you mentioned a couple people. Your husband is your hero, and Sharon Lecter. But if you had to look at your thirds from top, middle, bottom, who are some of the people that help inspire you to this day?
I would say Tony Robbins is up there. Tony Robbins, Sharon Lecter, David Corbin, who you might not know. He's in our circle. David Corbin, Mike Collier, who you might not know. He's in California. Les Brown, for sure. Love my Les Brown. And he's just so inspirational.
That's right.
And Frank Shankowitz, who unfortunately passed away not that long ago, was from Arizona. I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of meeting him, but he was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. He's a founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He has a movie coming. He has a movie that came out, and thank goodness his story was told before, before he left us, but his movie is called Wishman, so you should watch it.
Beautiful.
So one of the best movies ever. And David Meltzer. I mean, I can name a bunch. I have a pretty good circle of influencers. All right, those people that I'm on the same level with.
Yes.
Oh, some of those will probably be the same. David Corbin. Some other business people that I'm really good friends with. Some attorneys I'm really good friends with. And then people below. Is that okay? I would say, some of my partners, some of my business clients, some of my partners, I don't want to name their names because I don't want to say somebody's below me.
Right. No, you don't. That's not the right. Just people that you're helping, you're extending.
People that I'm helping would be my business partners. People I'm helping would be my team. It would be my employees. It would be people who want to become an M&A advisor. We have a training program. We have a partnership program. So it would be any of those people as well. And several different client companies. So, the people in those companies as well in each company.
I think it just makes for a richer life when you're doing business and having those relationships. And what I've felt and learned is relationships are everything. You can be the smartest gal or guy in the room, but if you don't have a hand to shake, you can't do business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm such a people person. So, there's times when I'm like, oh my gosh, I just need some downtime. But then an hour later, I'm like, where's my friends? Where's my friends?
Right. It's the extroverted introvert. I've learned that recently, that I'm much like yourself, where I can go into a room and never meet a stranger, but there's times where you need to decompress and get away, even if only for a moment. And I've learned that I'm that way myself. It's strange after, 39 years that you're still learning who you are. Yeah. But as far as your journey, right? Let's talk about getting into the book. And so this book you said was 2019, 2020. Was this kind of the next step in evolution after the prior book in 2012? And then what's changed in terms of your message and how you're delivering power and impact through the book?
So the book that I wrote in 2013 was my very first book I've ever written. And it was more of it was a step-by-step guide, but it didn't really do deep dives. It was more about, this is what you do to start your business and this is how you do it. If you need help, let us know. Whereas Exit Rich is more about really taking those deep dives and peeling back all the layers of the onion and explaining to business owners, hey, here's the ugly truth. You are probably going to go out of business, or you're not going to be able to sell your company, and you're probably going to close your doors, or even worse, file bankruptcy. That's the ugly truth. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be the statistic. You really can build a business that can run without you. So you can build a sustainable, scalable business that when you're ready is sellable. And if you never want to sell, that's okay, because you have a much more profitable business that doesn't need you. So this really takes deep dives into what I call the STGPS exit model, how to plan your exit from the beginning of buying or starting a business. Beautiful. Because that's the number one reason that businesses don't sell, is because business owners never think about their exit. They never think about planning their exit. They never think about selling their business until a catastrophic event has occurred.
Yep.
And when that happens, it's too late. So it really takes a deep dive into the STGPS exit model. It takes a deep dive into the seller's sanity check and the mindset, because it's a mindset about selling your business. So many business owners are emotional about their business. They're emotionally connected to their business. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm selling my baby. It's like,
I was just thinking that people refer to their business as their baby all the time. And if you refer to it as your baby, what else in this world would you kick, claw, and scream and do anything for except for your own child?
Right, exactly. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They kick, claw, scream. They do everything they can to keep their baby afloat, especially now during COVID. And they think of it as their baby instead of the business. So they make decisions based on emotions, not logic. And you should always make decisions based on logic.
It's a lower vibration to operate from emotion. Emotion's a beautiful thing. And I have a book that's coming out that touches on emotion pretty heavy. And I do a lot of emotional and behavioral work with people in my wealth planning business, because a lot of people do make decisions. And a lot of times when you make a financial decision from a place of emotion, especially if it's not, even if it's a positive one, but usually if it's a negative emotion, you're going to regret it. And you gotta train people. And I'm sure you probably do a lot of this, whether they're your partners or your, people that you, lines of business partners, I would call them, like people that you do business with. you probably do a lot of mindset coaching and education on how to look at things differently, how to prepare for this differently. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what the book is about. I mean, there's a whole chapter dedicated to mindset and going through different mental exercises to even see if you're ready to sell your business. Because here's the bottom line. I don't want to sell your business unless you really want to sell it. Because I guarantee if you really want to sell it, I'm going to get it sold.
I believe
But
it.
I don't want to get to the closing table and you walk away because seller's remorse sets in and you're not crystal clear on your next path. And business owners really will never follow through with the sell of their business if they haven't figured out their beginning strategy. They'll never move forward on the exit strategy without their beginning strategy.
Yep.
So we really do work with clients to figure out, what are you doing next? It's kind of like the empty nester syndrome. You know, when all the kids move out and all the kids go to college, mom and dad look at each other and like, now what?
Right. What's next? Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing with selling your business. What's next? And so there's a whole mindset chapter that we take people through, and what I call the seller sanity check. You know, when and how is the right time to sell your business, and how much money do you need from the sell, and you know, how much money do you need per month, how much money do you need per year, and you know, how long does that need to last you? So we go through all of these different activities just to get sellers mentally prepared. I mean, I once had a manufacturing plant, husband and wife, they walked away from 3 different LOIs, letter of intents.
Yep.
3, and they were good letters of intent. Every one of them was higher than the appraised value of the business. And so I sat down with them and said, look, I'm done. I'm taking it off the market. And so you figure out what you want to do. And they called me maybe about a month later and they said, we figured it out. We had an epiphany. We now know what we're going to do. And I'm like, what? And they go, we've always been passionate about bed and breakfasts. So we're going to take the proceeds of the sale and we're going to open a bed and breakfast where they're going to start one or buy one. And right after that, I bought another LOI. They accepted it. They closed and they moved to Vermont and started their own B&B.
So they ended up going down that path, and they were overlooking the things that were in front of them with those LOIs, letters of intent. And it's interesting. The people, you know, like you said, they need clarity. They need to be able to see the next step, especially entrepreneurs that are a lot of us are visionaries and a lot of us are big thinkers. A lot of us are dreamers and you know, what's next? And then as far as being able to figure that out, it removes that friction of indecision, which can kill people and kill businesses, especially in a speed-based business like mergers and acquisitions. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in a timely manner.
Well, I always say time kills deals. Time kills deals.
I agree.
And then the other thing too is when you know, think about when you were a kid, right? You said, oh, I was a hustler. You know, I did this and I did this. And when I was a kid, I was a writer. I loved to write. Well, we get so busy and so caught up in the day-to-day of our businesses and our families, tending to our families, our friends, you know, life. And we forget about what we once loved.
Yep.
We forget about what, you know, made us happy, what got our juices flowing, what we were once passionate about. And sometimes we just get so busy in a transactional, we lose passion, we lose our passion. And that's what they said. They loved B&Bs. When they started dating, they would go around and always stay at different B&Bs. They never stayed at a hotel. But years and years and years went by and they never took a vacation. They never stayed at a B&B again. So they forgot about what it was they once loved. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah.
And then when they had some time to think about it, like, oh, this is what we like.
Remember what's important, right?
Yeah.
And it's keep the, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with people about, achieving goals, and the goal is important, right? The goal gives you that North Star to align everything that you're doing towards hitting that goal. But it's the journey, the life moments, the things that happen between now and hitting that goal is what keeps life rich. And if you lose track of your why or your purpose or what motivates you, life becomes dull and you start to look at other things and like maybe your eyes stray and you don't want that goal anymore. And you're like, well, what do I do? So I think it's what you hit on is super important for anyone, personal, business wise. The other thing I think that you hit on that's really important that I see day to day is being practical, especially in a business setting and even in your family. This is a lifeblood in a kind of sterile, cold sense, but you need cash, and you need cash for a lot of things. And I think that where I see a lot of families that I manage and a lot of businesses that I manage where they could get in trouble and where I advise them on is cash flow. And it's a core tenet of anything. And it sounds so basic and so simple, but a lot of people don't know how to manage cash. They don't know how to have the right amount of money on hand. They don't know what to do with that money a lot of times. I'm not saying everybody, but it sounds like you've seen some of this in your work too, where companies were poorly positioned and it really hurt them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, P, you know, we have 6 Ps that we talk about. It's a foundation in our book, Exit Rich. And the last P is profits. And, people always say, Michelle, why did you put profits last? And I said, because everybody comes to me and say, Michelle, I have a profit problem. I'm like, no, you have a people problem. You don't have the right people in the right space. Or no, you have a process issue. You don't have efficient, productive processes. Or no, you have a product issue. Your product is on the way out. And if you don't pivot, you're going to be out of business. So profit is never the problem. It's always a symptom.
That's right.
Of not running on one of those other 5 Ps.
Yep. I believe it. And it's so powerful and impactful. And I'll leave that there just in the interest of time. There's one thing I do want to ask this is very greedy. I do like to ask one question that this has been a masterclass on life for me doing this podcast, excuse me, over the last 2 years, where I've met some of the most amazing people in business and in life and in the world. And it's just added so much color to my life. And the one question I have for you that I think would actually help a ton of listeners is, the mastermind we were in last week, there were amazing authors there like yourself. And they were talking about their writing process and from inception to market and sales. What have you learned as an author? Is this your second book that you've done?
I've actually written 3 books and a chapter in Think and Grow Rich.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so with 3 books under your belt, from the very first time that you've written a book till now, what has the strategy been and what's changed for you and how you incited the idea to actually selling the book? Like walk us through that process, what that looks like for you.
Sure. So writing a book is actually the easy part. To me, that's the easy part. Now, probably because I've always liked writing, but my strategy is this. And I've done it for 3 books and I'll probably have another 6 to 7 books in me.
Okay.
And so what I do, this is my strategy. I block off time. And it takes people years to write a book. And I'm like, I don't want to do anything that takes me years.
No, except for live.
It's just like, I don't want to do anything twice. I want to do it right. Just like when I film commercials and I do, videos and stuff like that, I'm like, I want to get it done the first time, the first take.
Yep.
So same thing with writing a book. So I block off time, and it's typically right before Thanksgiving. So right before Thanksgiving, all the way through Christmas during the holidays.
Yeah.
So that's 4 weeks, that's 5 weeks, and maybe 1 to 2 weeks in January. 6 weeks, typically 6 weeks, I can knock out the book. I wrote this 325-page book in 3 weeks called Exit Rich.
That's incredible, by the way.
And so I've written all 3 books that way. And the way I do it is I get up at 4 a.m. and I tell everybody, don't bother me. It's me, my husband and I, and my daughter. Now, the holidays is probably the worst time for somebody to write a book because I have family coming in. But it's the slowest time in one of my businesses, in my M&A practice. My other businesses are really busy during that time. But I have good employees. So I tell my employees, don't bother me unless the building's on fire. If you're about to lose a deal, you can handle it. Don't you dare call me unless you can't handle it. And then I tell my family, don't bother me until like 6 o'clock at night. So my husband has his family that comes in and stays with us, but they all know Michelle's writing a book, leave her alone. And I do that every day, 7 days a week. Typically getting up at 4 a.m. On the weekends, I might get up at 6,
Sleep
and
in.
I write all day. And I type every word in every word in there. Now that process is not going to work for everybody. That process probably will not work for most.
Yeah.
I tried dictating. It was terrible. It couldn't understand my accent. I even had a ghostwriter at one point, and it was horrible having a ghostwriter because I would, they would record me and I would talk, I would tell them all this stuff. And I would get the book back and I'm like, that's not what I said. I didn't say any of that. So I'm like, you know what? It's just easier for me to sit down and write it myself. And I don't do it in my office. I have a home office. And I said, it's just easier for me to do that myself. And instead of getting a ghostwriter, and I type every single word in the book.
True.
So the writing part for me, now I have my team do the research. I don't do any of the research. I have them do all the research. But the writing part for me is the easy part. It's the sales part.
Yes.
Is the hard thing, and Sharon and I are working towards a New York Times bestselling book with Exit Rich. All the stars will align. But that's the hard part, is selling the book, especially during COVID. We were supposed to launch in 2020, and we moved back our launch date a few times because of COVID. We had to pivot.
Yep.
Now
are you
the whole
doing
thing.
Self-published or traditional publishing?
No, the first book I did self-publish, and the reason I'm not doing self-published is because you can't make the list. You can't make like the Wall Street Journal list or the USA Today list or the New York Times list. So I did self-publish with Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth. Now, Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth was great for me because it was a great lead generator.
Yes.
We got a lot of leads off of that book. We were featured in Inc. twice because of Sell Your Business. We were featured in Forbes once. So we got a lot of publicity, even with a self-published book. Exit Rich, we have a publisher. We have lots of different people, we're working with marketing. We made a mistake and hired the wrong marketer. This marketer came highly recommended, but this marketer had really, really big authors who had huge followings. So they really didn't have to do any work.
Yeah.
And so, we realized that marketer is not working. So we had to get rid of that marketer and replace that person. So then we had to push the date back a little bit more. And so you just pivot, it is what it is. You don't let it get you down, and you just pivot. You just move on.
Last two questions that are kind of rapid style before we jump off. Biggest thing that you've learned in life that changes the way that you operate day to day. It could be a life lesson, it could be a business thing. It could be something, that you've overcome, what that is. And then also the second thing is, what's the top thing on your bucket list you're still looking to knock off?
So, all right. So number one, that's so hard because there's so many big lessons I've learned, it's so hard. But I think the biggest one is we've already talked about, and that is to realize that everyone's human. Not everyone's perfect. Not everyone is me. Not everyone is you, Jesse. And to really appreciate the people that you do have, really appreciate the people that you have on your team, appreciate them for their strengths.
Yep.
Don't focus on their weaknesses, focus on their strengths, and, really appreciate the team you have, because you don't build a business, you build people, and people build the business. And so I'm getting better and better with just really trying to appreciate the strengths that I have on my team.
Beautiful.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
And then being happy for what I have, because again, happiness is not reaching that goal. Happiness is the journey to get there.
Agreed.
And even, and this journey I'm on with Sharon, I mean, sometimes Sharon and I are like, not with each other, but with, the marketers and the people who say they can do things and don't do things. And, but just really enjoying the journey and learning from that, learning, who to hire, who not to hire, learning, make sure you do your due diligence and check off all the boxes.
Beautiful. Well said. And then one of the top items on your bucket list that you just can't wait to do, it seems to be that Musogi, that one thing that's the biggest thing.
Make it a New York Times bestsellers list. That's on our bucket list.
We're going to do everything that we can. We're syndicated in 12 cities. We know a lot of the same people. We're going to get you there. So let's just put it out in the universe today. But thank you so much. Let me be the first one from the audience and the listeners and the viewers to say thank you so much for who you are. Number one, as a person, keep hammering away in life. You're doing an amazing job. She's the amazing, mighty, powerful Michelle Seiler Tucker. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.